Let's do it again over there.
Yeah.
Someone who did.
Right, we'll try again. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to the meeting. Item number 1 is fire procedure. According to my notes, I've got to read out the public are present. So a fire drill is not expected. So if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of the staff. Please also make sure your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. And the chair will advise the meeting or part of the meeting will be recorded for future broadcast. My understanding we have got 2 recordings today, one from the council and one for Councillor Condicare. Right. Item number 2, apologies.
I have apologies from Councillor Watkins, whose sub is Patricia Elliott, and I have also Councillor Margrave, and he's been subbed by Councillor Kellam.
Okay. Okay, item number 3 is minutes on 26th of January. Can I sign them as a to the record?
We're ready to check.
Okay. We were members' declaration of interest. None other than the ones that are already indicated. Okay. Public consultation. We're supposed to have 2 members on the public screen today, but let's Mr. Goss hasn't turned up. So we've got Mr. Condicare wishing to speak, as I understand, on items 6 and 7. Is that correct?
Yes.
So can we take the report, can we take number 6 first? Linda, have you given this report?
Yeah, myself or Craig.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we, following the CSE's handling Rotherham, we looked at the report issued by Casey, the Casey report, and identified all of the issues that were actually, and the problems that were raised regarding Rotherham. And we looked at our own internal procedures and areas where there was room for improvement. And we brought a report to this committee in July of last year, outlining the outcomes of that review. And at that meeting, it was asked if we bring a further report when more action had been done. So this is an update, second update on what we've done and how we've moved forward since last July. Section 6 of the body of the report sets out the key issues, and there are still some areas where there is room for improvement, but we've certainly moved forward since last July. The first bullet point is with regard to member training and members engaging and attending training courses, and there are plans for next financial year to try and address this further and work with the portfolio holders. The second bullet point, training on CSE. We've offered both employees and elected members training during 16-17, and a lot of members and employees have attended the training. There's also some online training that we have access to via Warwickshire County Council. We have got further training dates for 17-18. These will be released by Bernardo's, who provide the training, and we'll circulate those dates shortly and hopefully get more people trained. On training for taxi drivers, our licensing section has provided training using Bernardo's, and possibly 2/3 approximately of our taxi drivers have received that training. We have now got a new policy in place which makes this training compulsory for all taxi drivers, so there will be further training dates again in 17-18 to ensure that 100% of our taxi drivers receive the training. And we are aware that the police have taken training for our hotel and guest house staff, because the taxi drivers, guest house and hotels are the areas of greatest risk. Other areas where our licensing function have improved, say we've got the new policy. That policy has been amended so that now officers have the ability to revoke a licence when they consider a public to be at risk. Previously it had to come to committee, so licences can be revoked a lot more quickly. There is recent case law around that which has allowed us to introduce that. There's also clearer direction of what offences and allegations should go before committee, so that brings in some consistency. And our taxi marshals have done a lot more checking of driver's badges and vehicle licences. And we've also continued to have good relationships with other partners such as the police and the community education children's services, which so they remain effective. There was an issue at Rotherham around the confidential reporting code, and issues were being reported to the council but were being ignored. We've looked at our confidential reporting code, and there's actually a report with a revised code going to audit committee next week. There's also a proposal that I be appointed as the council's whistleblowing officer, so that I can raise awareness about the code and be the single point of contact and provide training, because we, in all fairness, we don't get many referrals, so we need to raise awareness around that. And on the personal development reviews, the figure that we reported last July was 58% of our employees had received a PDR within a 12-month period, and that has now gone up to 83%, so there's been an improvement there. We've provided some statistics in section 7. It was very difficult in July last year to get any figures. I think CSE has always been out there. We've always had it across Warwickshire and within this borough, but it was also always being reported as child abuse and not actually CSE. But Rotherham has highlighted how important it is. So statistics are becoming available. And it's quite... in the second table, there were 172 proven offences of CSE across Warwickshire, which is quite high across, and that was within 15-16. And looking at the figures for the current year, we've already had over 120 proven cases. So it is out there, but it's something that we can't ignore. And then at the appendix, we've got a table. We've got the first column, the query, they're the issues that were raised in the casing report about Rotherham. The middle column there is our responses and what we reported to you in July, and then the final column is the update for, as of this month, March 2017. Where we've got no further action, it means that there's no areas for improvement in that area as far as we're aware. On page... hasn't got page, it's point 14 of section 1. We've got no further update, and that's in relation to does the council have a robust risk management process in place and are registers subject to scrutiny. We haven't actually updated that, but I can let you know that we are looking at changing the audit plan, the internal audit plan for next year, and we will be auditing some of the risks and the controls within the risk register to make sure that they do exist, that they are effective and they can be relied upon to mitigate the risk, so it will show how well we're managing risk. And that report again is going to Audit Committee next week for approval. And that's all I wanted to say. If there's any questions, either myself or Craig will try and answer them.
Mrs. Condicott, would you like to address?
Yeah, there's not a lot. There were just 2 points I wanted to pick up on. One was in section 1, the second bit, are all complaints made against elected members appropriately investigated? Now obviously this is nothing, it's not related to CSE, but if complaints that were regarding potential CSE, if they're investigated anyway, that my experience of other complaints against councillors, I wouldn't have any faith in the system whatsoever. That's just point. It takes so long, so if there was anything with CSE, an awful lot of bad things could have happened in the meantime. The other thing was further, actually in the beginning of the bit, about member training and things. It says members failing to engage and attend training courses. If that's the case, is there a need to make it compulsory? Most other jobs of whatever nature have compulsory professional development. So, and picking up CSE certainly has always been an issue that I've had to do updated training regularly when I was working. So I just putting that out there. That's all I want to say.
Craig, Linda, do you wish to?
In terms of, I can't really answer the first, certainly the second point for the member training. We did hold a session last year where we had, I believe it was 13 elected members turned up. The other session that we did plan, to be fair, was on the 5th of November, so there wasn't much of an appetite for coming out on it was Halloween, apologies. It was on the 31st of October, sorry, I knew it was one of them, sorry. So as you can imagine, the appetite wasn't there for that evening. But we have got more sessions planned, and we are planning on more internal sessions for CSE. I'm in the process of arranging one specifically for council employees and elected members for May time directly with Bernardo's, in addition to the sessions that they hold, which are for all multi-agency.
Sorry, Joe, if I can just deal with the first point. Clearly, if there was allegations of child sexual exploitation, it would be a matter for the police. In the first instance, we would not deal with it. It would be handed straight out to the police to investigate.
Any members of the panel wish to ask Mr. Condicott questions? No, thank you. Right, put forward to the debate then. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, Caroline, Councillor Phillips here, who's lost her voice, would like me to point out things. Item 9 in the report, the gifts and hospitality policy, has that now been added to the Constitution? It has. Right, so that's updated then. Number 18, I was a bit concerned where it said there, no best practice is not always followed. Is that an area that we should improve? What is the definition of best practice not being followed? Or
Sorry, where was it?
Shirley, too.
number 18, Shirley. That's a bit concerning. No best practice is not always followed. I mean, are we going to, is it a recommendation that we will include the forward plan and performance reports on future scrutiny meetings? I think the forward plan going on is a definite, yeah.
Chair, there is a report that came to this panel last meeting for the overview and scrutiny review, which recommends that the forward plan goes on all agendas for
Right.
OSPs. That report was passed by this panel, but because we've no longer got the commission, it's having to go to each of the panels for their views. So it's just taking a little bit longer to come through, but that's how we're hoping we can address some of the issues there.
Right, thank you very much. Number 24, Should we recommend that this is addressed, that there's no monitoring mechanism currently in place regarding the impact of our review and scrutiny, and that recommendations that we do make or officers make are not documented by overview or scrutiny, and the outcomes are not always known. I mean, is it something that we need to address as a scrutiny organisation, that any recommendations or future outcomes of our recommendations actually come back to us?
Again, I think that's one for Shirley.
Well, it's one of those awkward things. We do try to do action sheets to remind officers what actions have been asked of them. But we don't, the same with Cabinet. Currently, we don't have a mechanism in place whereby those actions are then marked off as being done. You know, if you ask an officer to do something, they are asked to do it, but nobody then says, well, did you do it? So that mechanism's not in place.
So that's something
But
possibly
it's
scrutiny
something that we
committees
could look
ought to, yeah.
Unfortunately, at the moment, given the staffing issues in them services, I don't have time to do
No,
action
okay,
sheets.
right,
But it is there.
yeah.
And
And you,
you,
yeah, and I think the last, is this the last one, Caroline? Because these are yours. Number 29, service level agreements. How much power does scrutiny actually have in calling contractors to scrutiny panels regarding services that they provide? And partners, yeah.
It depends on the partner, it depends who it is. Unfortunately, we don't have, I mean, for example, as you know, we have difficulty getting the county council to come, and they're
Yeah.
one of our main partners.
Yeah.
But how you can't force anybody to come really,
Right.
other than to.
I would suggest that if we in future the county council officers do not come, then we write to the chief exec and also the leader of the council, whoever that might be, stating that we're disappointed in the fact that county officers.
We usually do.
Yeah, you do.
Yes.
Good. All right. And they totally ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we do have there is a list of partners that we have various duties towards us. Some of whom have a duty to provide us with information, and others who actually do have a duty to attend. And then we've got people like George Eliot Hospital and that who are always happy to come, and they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to. So it varies.
Thank you, Chair.
okay. Councillor Condacana.
Yeah, there's quite a few things here. I mean, the appendix, section 1, is very much about the failings of Rotherham Council in general in terms of scrutiny and the way the council worked. And obviously I see a lot of those failings in this council, but one of the big differences is Rotherham, I think, was a unitary, so it had a lot more functions. So a lot of the functions actually would pick up on stuff in here are dealt with by the county council. So, yeah, I could go at great length of all the things the council does wrong with scrutiny and complaints procedures and whatever. But in some ways, we don't do that sort of stuff here. But there are obviously things like the taxi licensing that does interface with cases. And I was shocked when I was on the licensing committee, the behaviour of some taxi drivers and the sort of stuff that goes on. And that then brings me to things like, on the radio it's reported, taxi drivers who are banned, or not given a licence or whatever, there's not a central database. So I don't know how much information sharing there is across Coventry and Warwickshire in terms of if we have suspicions or Coventry had suspicions about someone and then they end up coming here for a taxi licence, how that sort of thing works. And the other thing, numbers are always very frightening. I don't know if the 170s and 120s are 120 or 170 perpetrators or a lower number of perpetrators doing several different offences, and how and where councils or council licence things like where they're being picked up.
I understand the statistics are the number of children, so it could be one person, but 6 children involved that have been exploited. So this is the number of children, which is again, is quite frightening, really.
Councillor Haynes?
Just to say that we do take consideration of what's going on out there. And I well remember your vice chairman referring one straight away, and it was unanimous, wasn't it? So we're not blind to what's going on out there.
No, we're not.
Okay. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Haynes is quite correct. One, I did refer, although there was a question from members on the committee, a couple of members on the committee, whether it was the committee's place to refer. And luckily the majority persuaded the others that actually it's everyone's duty to refer, and it would rather the police and the child sexual abuse inquiry have it twice than not at all. And so I was glad that the committee was unanimous on that one. There was a slight question mark at one point, but it was pleasing. The report statistics, unfortunately, my declaration is already there. Bear out my anecdotal evidence from working in the court service. Unfortunately, the largest proportion in Warwickshire does seem to be from Nuneaton and Bedworth, and it's a sad truth, a very, very sad truth. And I've seen some of the things which do occur, and they would keep people up at night, some of the things which happen and turn your stomach, they really do. And I'm pleased to see that the report is moving to address some of these concerns. Whilst I would agree with Councillor Condacor that there are political failings sometimes in this organisation, with my experience, I would say that actually, if it was to come to child sexual exploitation and things like that, I would actually believe that this council would be able to act robustly in those terms. I have political disagreements with the controlling group and processes, etc., but that is a separate argument to this one, which is about child sexual exploitation, which I would hope and actually believe is a unanimous aim of all political parties on this council. Referring back to the review, because a lot of the stuff which has come forward, as Phil and Shirley mentioned, came back from the review. We actually had this Rotherham report before us when we were looking at it on the working party. So we looked at issues where we could try and address some of the failings, where we could identify them and tighten things up, and Councillor Neil Phillips and Caroline Phillips have picked up on those. We were very alive to these and tried to make recommendations to try and address these where we could. We hope there will be a political impetus and will to do so across the chamber. Just looking at the agenda for housing, which I'm also on, one of the things that Councillors Phillips picked up on was the reporting back of recommendations and updating on that. Actually, that's one of the things we picked up on in the review, and there is in there a suggested form for how to report back on the recommendations and their effectiveness and other things like that. So we were very conscious of those and trying to pick it up. Whilst the Rotherham report was specifically about child exploitation, they were picking up on the effectiveness of councils full stop, not just in child sexual exploitation. That is the element which I believe this council needs to pick up on in particular, the political side and the mechanics and operation of councils as normal. The child sexual exploitation element just made the failings at Rotherham 10 times worse. And that's why it's gathered so much attention. So I think it's clearly a step in the right direction, especially with the personal development reports. That is a bugbear of mine, as someone who has to give these things in my work life. It is a personal bugbear of mine. It's a step in the right direction, but 83% is still not good enough. The council should not rest on its laurels, and it should be aiming for 100%, because that's what you're expected in other areas of life, whether it be public or private sector. You are expected to have 100%, unless they're off sick or on maternity. Unless you're telling me that 17% are on sick or maternity, then that's not going to cut it with me.
The calculation ignores those people that aren't here for a valid reason. So if there's a valid reason why they haven't had their PDR, such as maternity, they don't count. So we should be achieving 100%. That's what we should be aiming for.
So I would hope to see that the next report would show us in the 90s moving towards 100%.
Councillor Condrigan?
Just going back, one point wasn't picked up is information shown between our licensing and what goes on here, because obviously taxi drivers are one of the more mobile things, yeah. Hotels and other things sort of stay put, but there is a thing with taxi drivers is they do move around between being licensed in different authorities, and we have a lot of taxi drivers here who actually live in Coventry. So yeah, we do want to make sure that that best practice and fears are actually shared.
Could anybody answer that?
Yes. Okay. Councillor, I did have a quick chat with Carl, and if any issues of this nature do come up, I said I would take them back to him, because I can't, to be honest, give a 100% accurate answer. I do know that they do share information between authorities if there is concern, and also that drivers are required to provide regular DBS checks. So if there is any issues that have been raised by police or any other agency, it would come upon the DBS check, which I believe they're required every 3 years to undertake.
Just following up from that, there's, well, Coventry and Nuneaton and Bedworth. From my sense, I was a taxi driver in a previous life, shall we say. But my concerns would be over the Uber, the new system that's coming in, because where are they licensed from? And because I've noticed that they started to come within the borough, and if you go onto their apps, there's people pick you up and drop you off, etc. Do they come under the same scrutiny as what our taxi drivers and Coventry taxi drivers would come under?
I'm not familiar with that. We'd have to get a response from licensing on that one.
Yeah, because I do know that some Uber drivers are working within the authority. I think it's just a case of they're in the area, and if somebody wants picked up to go from A to B, then they pick them up and go. You know, it's like that, but it's something we should perhaps look at in the future as well. So what's the recommendation from the panel then? Oh, sorry,
Could I suggest the point you've just made is dealt with under matters arising at the next meeting we have? Because I don't think it's something we should ignore, really. If Uber drivers are operating in this district, then I think they should come under the licensing authority in just the same way, really. So, and it may be just a matter of looking at the contract of employment which Uber employs to take on drivers and put them on their registry. So I do think we should pick it up as quickly as possible, which would be under matters arising at the next meeting.
Well, wouldn't a better route be to refer this to the licensing committee itself?
Okay.
The panel's quite happy with that, because as I know that Uber probably comes under the private hire system rather than the Hackney card system, which is a myriad of different things. You know, they can't pick off the street, but they can pick up individuals who ask them to come to their homes or pubs or clubs or wherever. So it's a wee bit different from the ordinary licence Hackney thing, the drivers. So there's yeah. So if you want to bring that up and pass it forward to the committee involvement, let's turn around and do that. Plus the other things would be mentioned as well, yeah. Councillor Condicor.
It'd also be useful to regularly report these statistics to whichever committee is most appropriate. So we, because I say there's a lot more detecting of it now, and it's be really useful to have an annual or whatever.
I don't see a particular problem with that. Everybody happy with the recommendations that?
Would it come back to this panel, or would it be some?
Which panel would it come back to? This one or audit?
Reporting on the CSE stats.
What we could perhaps do is put some CSE statistics on the TEN system, which is then available for all members. Because I think it is important that all members are aware of what's going on. Across the borough.
Could you maybe put the, would it be worth putting the stats on the end of year, annually on the end of year performance report that comes to this committee?
Yeah, we do.
Would that be?
Yeah.
No,
And put them on 10.
On 10 and on the end of year report.
Yeah.
So with that, would it says that elected members are to note the context of this report. We note the contents with the things we've suggested to go forward, yeah?
Yes, Joe.
Okay, thank you. Right, item number 7, integrity performance report. I believe Mr. Codicor, you wish to speak on this, but we'll let the officer present the report first.
Thank you, Chair. I'll sort of lead off, but as I've got Linda and Jonathan here, who I don't know whether he has been introduced to the panel yet, Chair, but if we can introduce Jonathan White, who is the Head of Town Centres and Marketing. Jonathan will be talking to you later in terms of town centres, but he might be able to assist in terms of some of this performance report.
I was intending to introduce them at that bit rather than this bit. I was going to say something like this is you needed Bedworth, you're quite welcome to it or something like that, you know, or whatever I always seem to get that bit wrong, you know, but welcome anyway.
Thank you. Chair, if we can do with this in the usual way by way of exceptions reporting, if we can start, you'll see on page 14 you have the table, the 4-quadrant table setting out some of the key indicators for this panel, and we'll go into more detail in terms of the budgetary position and particular services in due course, but probably the key point to note is overall that the projected outturn for this year for the budgets within the purview of this particular panel are coming under budget. So there's some explanations as to why that is.
Can we let the officer do the report first and then we'll get a member of the public and then bring the panel in, Councillor.
So turning to page 16, Chair, you'll see there's the table which has the summary of the budget and budget position. The emboldened text is that which is showing a variance, either a positive or a negative variance, as the case may be. So you'll see that commercial property and industrial estates, there is effectively an under-recovery of income or rent of £19,000. That is projected. Similarly, you'll see markets, again, a projected budget variance of £28,000. And then again, rent allowance and rent rebates and revenues, you'll see there are underspends which offset some of those other items. Overall, the total underspend on against budget is £203,000, and as I say, that's just a summary of all of that. I think I'm just going to check with Linda whether she's actually in a position to give a bit more detail on the commercial properties, whether we can explain the non-smiley face in terms of the decreased income against the anticipated on current occupancy levels.
Yeah, I have spoken to Les Snowden on that one, and that variance is mainly due to NNGR payments not being received on void properties. They also had one of our occupiers that went into liquidation. He's one of our key occupiers of a property, so we've lost income there. And also there's been a salary overspend during the year because they only budgeted for 11 months of a new employee, but they were actually with us for the 12 months, but the budget had already been approved. So it's always showing 1 month's salary overspend on there. And they were the key items. I did ask as well about, on page 16, why the current year's budget is lower than the actual outturn for last year, and that is because there was a rent review that covered a 2-year period. So during 15-16 we actually received some back pay from the previous year. So that was sort of a one-off payment, so that's why there is a difference there.
Turning the page, Chair, to page 18, elections turnout. I'm not going to dwell on this one. I think I've spoken at length about this, but clearly the overall turnout, we don't include the referendum. If we did, it would be a smiley face, of course. We look to elected members as candidates to engage and enthuse the electorate to come out in their masses to vote. And it won't happen this May, but in May 12 months, we're looking forward to a huge turnout at the next borough elections in 2018. I'm not going to say more than that. If I can then turn to markets, and you'll see there is and again this has already been reported to you before, that there is a reduced income due to permanent traders ceasing to trade. And I don't know whether at this point this is an opportunity for you to hear Jonathan speak, whether he wants to say anything meaningful and interesting at this point in time.
I will certainly do my best. I'm sort of 6 weeks into position now. Clearly I've sort of taken time out to look at both of the core town centres, understand really where we are in terms of the commercial mix within those town centres, and obviously with the market falling under my remit as well, looked at the market operation and the situation there. I think it's important really to understand the element of the national picture and what we're up against nationally. I'll just give you some quick figures if you don't mind. In terms of, since 2007, 378 medium to large retail groups have failed in the UK, which has resulted in the closure of 28,500 stores across the UK. That, as a consequence, has had obviously a knock-on impact upon the vacant unit rates within the UK, which from 2007 was standing at 7% and peaked at 2012 at 16.5%. It's now standing currently at 11.3% vacancy rates. There's also been obviously a continuing sort of decrease in consumer confidence and disposable income, and that together with the changing shopping habits of our customers, who are now shopping increasingly online, are looking for convenience at both local and neighbourhood level, and the increasing demand upon for leisure activities within town centres has clearly had an impact. And I think we can't affect the national picture dramatically, but what we can do is concentrate on what we can actually do in terms of impacting upon the local centres ourselves, and what we can do at local level that can really have an impact. And my first impressions really are that we need to create an environment where people want to come. I'm looking at whether we can do some spring cleans around the town centres. I do think they look a bit tired at this present moment in time. Improve how we communicate to our key stakeholders, our customers being the developers, looking at trying to attract inward investment, how we communicate importantly to our communities and how we get them involved within the town centres and encourage them to come in. And I've been meeting some of those groups in my first few weeks in post to sort of speak with those people, and it's been very positive in terms of how we can get some of those groups involved.
Just before you go too far, because I think you're getting into your presentation now, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. If I could just come back to
the markets.
Yeah.
Getting carried away here, sorry.
Obviously, as you'll see, Bedworth Market on page 20 is doing okay. It's above its benchmark. It's the Nuneaton market that is below its benchmark. You'll see the figures there. So it's really in terms of the picture, in terms of where we are in terms of our market and how our market is faring against the markets generally in the UK. And I think the general.
Well, I think you know we do have to consider that. If you look at sort of neighbouring markets, particularly Hinckley and Tamworth, our market in terms of numbers is a much larger and established market. The market trade as a whole is suffering. There aren't new people coming into the market trade as we would like, and we have to look at how we can encourage elements of that, but also look at the sort of niche and theme markets. And I've been having initial discussions with a company who has established markets elsewhere and can bring in wholesale elements of street food, be it evening markets or to bolt onto the existing market, craft elements, etc. So we'll be looking at seeing how we can impact on that and also give our community the level of market element that they're looking for.
Thank you, Chair. If I can move then on to page 22. Again, we've got some non-smiley faces in connection with processing of benefit claims. I'm just going to ask Linda to update the panel on in terms of the background to that and what's happened.
Yeah, I haven't received a response with regard to new claims because the difference is fairly small. The biggest difference is on change of circumstances. And what I've been told is that we now, when the Department of Work and Pension receive a change of circumstance for their benefit claimants, it's automatically passed on to us. So the actual volume of change of circumstances has increased, which has had an impact on performance.
Thank you, Chair. Just moving on, there are no more smiley, non-smiley faces on the report. So there are some, particularly in terms of things like council tax and business rate collection, where it seems fairly neutral or statistically insignificant, the differences. But it does then lead us into the strategic risk register. I wasn't going to go through it other than to point out that we're presenting it in a slightly different way, and you'll see that we've very cleverly given you a black and white version with reference to different colours. And if you can tell what a green and a red is, you're doing very well. It looks wonderful online, but as a printed version it's quite difficult to understand and interpret. So apologies for that. I think it would be a case of we'll answer questions on the strategic risk register if any members wish to have it. The only thing I would highlight is the point Linda made earlier. We will be looking particularly at the reds and ambers, the net reds and ambers as part of the audit programme, because one of the issues that we feel needs to be checked is that where we say we're doing things, that we are actually doing them to mitigate those risks. I just want to make one observation, because it can get a little bit confusing, but on page 27 you'll see there's a key that refers to red as unacceptable. That's almost like a term of art in this context, because where you have a net red risk, it is unacceptable, but it is something that is effectively beyond our ability to mitigate out of the red zone. Short of not doing something, not providing a service or whatever it is. But I mean, if you look at some of them to do with town centre vitality and viability, clearly the ability of the council to significantly impact upon that is extremely limited. So it's identified in terms of it being unacceptable because we would, if in the ideal world, not want to have any net reds. However, by definition, there are some that are just so big by implication in terms of the impact that they would have that it's difficult to get them out of. That leads, lastly, Chair, to page 47, and you'll see then we have the summary of the strategic performance report. It summarises largely what you've just looked at. You'll see that there are some, the revenue forecast outturn is for December, is the trend is going in the opposite direction. From memory, I believe the next report you'll get will show the arrow going the other way, so things have improved again, but I can't give you figures because I can't remember what they are. Similarly, you'll see that the housing revenue account is also sort of deteriorating, but again, I understand that that has gone in the opposite direction as well, since sundry debt collection is up, council tax collection is down, business rates and rent collection is up, and you'll see that waste recycling, it shows a down arrow. We haven't got the November data yet, but I'm guessing that that will be imminent. We rely upon the county council to provide us with that from their when they weigh the vehicles, and I think there's a bit of delay in that coming through. So I will ask Linda to follow that up with the county council to see whether or not we've had that. If we have, we might be able to send that out to members separately. Customer satisfaction grounds maintenance is down, as you'll see. That is in connection with, in particular, that's the sort of, if you like, the general customer satisfaction. The difficulty we've got, and it is something that I've asked Paul Daly to put into his business plan for next year, the difficulty we've got is in terms of measuring customer satisfaction. We are sending out anything upwards of 250 to 300 notifications to at random, so it's a random sample to members of the public, and we're getting 1 or 2 back. In some cases, we've had none back in some months, and it does make it absolutely, well, statistically speaking, insignificant to work out where we are. So it is something I've asked Paul Daly to look at to see whether we can find a different way of garnering this information, so we get something that that is reliable. We know there are anecdotal issues in some areas, but overall the general consensus is that the performance is acceptable in the state of the contract and what we paid for that. But of course we can think of circumstances and instances that fall short. But it's actually having some demonstrable evidence to support that, which is proving to be difficult. And similarly, the standards of maintenance in informal areas, that's an assessment undertaken by the parks team. So it's done, we do what we call joint monitoring, and it is something that we've been working with a contractor on, specifically to do with weed spraying and paths in formal areas, which are the natural areas. We've got to distinguish between formal and informal. Formal is any park or open space, children's play area, etc. The informal are places like Whittleford Park or any of the natural areas, the natural habitats that we maintain, where there are, for reasons, it's statistical again, I guess, but there's four or maybe 5 indicators that are measured. So you drop one, you're dropping anywhere between 25% or 20% depending on where you are instantly. So it's quite difficult for the contractor to maintain a high percentage, but we are working with them because we have asked them to do that. Other than that, Chair, again, the sickness absence is obviously a cause for concern, as you will see. Whilst it's an upward arrow in terms of trend, the reality is that we've already well above what we've indicated where we wanted to be by the end of the year, which is just coming up in a couple of weeks. So it is something that we are constantly looking at to try and manage and improve, and we're looking at systems, we're looking at policy, and we're looking to see whether there's any other things that we can do by way of intervention to improve and better the performance that we had. I think 2 years ago, I think was our best performance thus far. I don't want to say any more than that, Chair. Obviously, if there are any questions from the panel, we'll endeavour to answer.
Mr. Conditore, you wish to speak on this item?
Yes, please. I'll probably run out of time, so I'll just work through. I can't say. I'm just going to mention things that I just picked out as I went through. The performance indicator measure summary is very alarming in my books. 56% declined and 78%, say more declined and things. I know times are difficult, but don't even seem to be standing still, so that is a concern. Philip Richardson didn't really sort of say too much about the elections, but I think there's a lot that the Borough Council could be doing to actually help encourage people to vote and things. In the current In Touch magazine, there's a tiny little bit saying, oh yes, they're going to be elections. The only thing it mentions that some of the boundary for the Warwickshire County Council elections, the only thing it mentions is that the some of the boundaries have changed and things. There's nothing in there about what the county council does, why it's important that people vote, you know, and things. It would take nothing to just put a few extra lines, and it, you know, just might encourage a few people, because, you know, I've canvassed an awful lot of things. People don't know the difference of what the borough does, what the county does. If you say it's a county election, they then say, oh, I'm complaining about this. You know, that's not something that, you know, comes under this and things. So there's an awful lot that could be done, and, you know, with the comms team using Facebook and all those sort of things. Markets, big concern as ever. I was particularly concerned with that because reading the minutes of the previous meeting, which I didn't come along to and things, it appears that the proposal to review and realign the council strategies for town centres, car parking and market trading and charging regimes, blah blah blah, what was, you know, turned down. So the impression I get is that the people on the panel, you know, aren't really taking it, you know, seriously, and it really is a serious issue. And on the beginning bit on the borough plan, you know, it actually specified that, you know, that one of the draws of Nuneaton had always been the market, and the market was, you know, an issue, how you keep it vibrant and what have you and things. So it's something that really needs a serious amount of looking at. I know you obviously are aware of it, yes. And on it, and I'm sure you'll say more in your bit. On the risk register, very concerned about the borough plan. I mean, net risk of very high, serious, you know, red, and this is after all this time. I won't go. R4, failure to maintain the economic vibrancy of the borough town centres. The sources of assurance don't reassure me at all. The combined authority minutes, the LEP minutes don't reassure me at all, and I don't think they should reassure you.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to make any comments?
I don't know whether Jonathan wants to deal with the last point.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the town centre, like I say, you know, it's what we're able to do at sort of local level, I think, is important now. I think we do need to accept that our town centres are changing, that we're seeing them shrinking in terms of the cause, that the way that people are using them are changing, and that what people want from them is changing, and we have to be able to accept it for one, and then be able to adapt to it. The level of residential and commercial units shifting to residential as well, I think, is one of the long-term saviours of town centres, and we need to see perhaps or consider how we can encourage that. But some of that is obviously around development, in terms of having the appropriate sites and identifying the development sites and ensuring that we provide the right provision to encourage that kind of thing as well. But having said that, like I say, I do believe that we need to bring the community more into the fold. We need to engage with them, and we need to use elements of digital technology to support that and communicate in the way that they want us to communicate with them. So there's a lot to sort of formulate.
I realise you've only just sort of started on the task.
But actually, Chair, it's a good time to start, as you know, and ironically, there is a meeting, or there was a meeting, I think, on Monday at the LEP in connection with the monies that have been awarded through the last budget. And obviously, as you know, the Country Warwickshire LEP were awarded for £4 million, of which a large proportion, well,
yes.
not a proportion of that, is coming to Nuneaton and Bedworth. So,
yeah, but they haven't said what, and that's why I say it doesn't reassure me.
Well, it will eventually.
I think, provided the audit committee approve the approach to internal audit work for next year, our internal audit service will be a key source of assurance, because we will be looking at all of these controls that we are relying upon, particularly ones where we've got a risk that is gross red and net green, because obviously we're relying on those controls quite a lot. So they're the ones that we'll be looking at. But it's very dependent on audit committee approval next week.
Is anybody was a...
Just a thing, while we're talking
If you
about...
ask Mr Condicon any questions on...
No, well, we're talking about the demise of the town centres.
Yeah, well,
And
on this occasion, is there any points of clarification from the speaker?
no clarification. I just wanted to make a point.
Yes, you can do it in a minute.
Uh,
So, there's no questions or clarification. Thank you very much. Now I'll throw open to the debate. Councillor Haynes.
Yeah, well, we talk about the town centres dying. In Rope Walk, in the perfume shop there, I was buying perfume at £24 a bottle. In Bedworth, I can go to a shop just down the road, B&M I think it is, £6 a bottle. Now, it makes you wonder why people are leaving the town centres and going to out-of-town shopping. Our market has suffered in Bedworth just the same as any other market, but adjacent to the market we've got the pound shop, we've got Aldi, and we've got Home Bargains, where you can still buy cheaper goods than you can from the market. And people, when they're strapped for cash, will go where they can get things cheap.
Councillor Condicon.
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of things. I might need a breather to get some answers if I do too long a list. Right at the beginning, we're £200,000 better off than we're supposed to be, but our budget has gone up by £700,000. So it's an outturn 1.9 million, almost 2 million. Current budget 2.7 million. So somewhere things are accounted for differently, or I don't understand how we've upped the budget by 700,000. I don't remember us having lots of money. So is this an accounting thing that's actually inflated the budget? Second point I want to make is particularly on the commercial and industrial property. We're underperforming, but we've actually got everything occupied. And I'm particularly concerned that have we got things occupied, but people aren't paying the bills? If we're underperforming on income, and you mentioned one large retailer has gone into receivership, have we got full commercial buildings, but we're actually not getting a good return on them? And particularly I heard that one of the pound shops in Nuneaton's closing. I don't know if it's the one that used to be the Woolworths, but that is potentially yet another loss of a couple of £100,000 of income. So I am concerned about this commercial stuff, particularly as we are or were dependent on it for £1 million of income. When we go to election turnouts, absolutely we get really interested in Whitestone, Weddington, St Nick's elections. Us lot around here get 40% turnout. But we do need to infuse people in the rest of town. And yeah, Bedworth market stalls, we so underprice the market stalls in Bedworth to keep them full, which you can argue is a good or bad thing. But the pricing of the Nuneaton market stalls is totally different. We price them as a premium product, higher than virtually any other market stall in the country, and then we wonder why we get less traders. So there's probably a debate to be had on the price of Bedworth market stalls, but there's a totally different way the market stalls are priced in Nuneaton. And that is really killing the traders because they've got higher parking charges now. There's 20% hike, you keep saying doesn't exist. So that applies to the market traders themselves and to the market trader customers, the customers. So they get a double whammy from that and ferociously high market things. I'll come back to the risk register later.
Okay. Do you wish to answer any of these comments?
I don't trade.
The two markets are very different animals, certainly, and I think there were certainly opportunities within Bedworth market to drive that more and drive the revenue based on the current rents. In terms of the rents for here, it's probably a bit early for me to comment directly in terms of the value that they provide, but what I would sort of go back to is in terms of how we compare to other markets in the locality, our market is far stronger in terms of numbers. It still does attract people, and you know, be interesting to see if we can get some involvement with some of these niche markets, whether or not we can actually improve the performance overall in relation to that, without it potentially affecting taking a drop in rent. But you know, that's obviously open for review and recommendation. There's a lot of work to be done in relation to the markets. I still think they have a place, but like everything in town centres at the moment, they're evolving and adapting, and I think we have to see what we can do to sort of, you know, drive with that and work with it.
Can I just point out on the markets figure, although it has got a sad face, we're projecting 146,000 by year end, but that is way above the budget, which was only 118,000, and the previous year's figure is 134,000. So although it has got a sad face, we're still performing well against budget and against the previous year's outturn figure.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. I really do welcome Jonathan coming to the meeting tonight, because there are those of us who have questioned since the last town centre manager had an enforced departure about the need to have someone taking ownership and control. And some of the things that you've been saying tonight really do reassure me that we might just be about to start turning a corner, because I think these past 2 years when we've been out without someone with the experience and the dedication, I think it's allowed the decline to continue, and we need to arrest that decline in some way, shape or form. And some of the ideas that you've mentioned tonight really do fill me with some confidence. I wait to see how your plans start to develop, because we haven't had an awful lot to base our future hopes on. It's interesting that you say that markets are far stronger, or our market has a far stronger attraction compared to some of our competitors in the immediate area. But then why is footfall decreasing? That is the evidence we have heard from the manager of Road Walk. He said it had decreased by £250,000. And on top of that, and I'm hoping Phil can answer this question for me, looking at page 24, now either the council has changed its policy and it wants to sell less car parking tickets, or that smiley face is the wrong way around. Because how can a decline of 258,000 tickets compared to 15-16 to 16-17 in anyone's reality be a smiley face? That does not make sense to me at all. I mean, I've read the explanation. They're trying to quote the Bedworth car park not selling tickets. Well, that's 7,617. Well, that's only 3% of the difference. And then I doubt the other 251,000 is completely made up of Harefield Road. So I accept what we're saying about things changing with e-shopping, using Amazon, using eBay, whatever. But you're naive if you're going to blame it all on that in the space of 1 year, a £258,000 ticket decline. That does not make sense to me.
Well, I can't answer that, Chair. However, I know a man who can. I'm going to hand over to Cash, who's just the man for the job, and I'll invite him to respond to that, because I can't answer it, because like you, I looked at that and it didn't make sense to me either. So if I can hand over to Cash, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Chair, Vice Chair, that's a very valid point that you raised. There's a big drop, there's quite a drastic drop. 257,915 tickets, that's a large drop. And apologies for that, that's a 21% drop. I revisited the figures, and you're quite right. Although we've taken out of the equation the railway car park, Bedworth Railway car park, also Meadow Street car park. What we need to understand is, unfortunately, when we changed Harefield from a multi-storey car park from a pay on foot to a pay on display, we've changed SIM card provider from Vodafone to EE. Regrettably, the EE cards were not available, so I didn't have the data for Harefield multi-storey car park from the beginning of April to the end of December. That's why the figures look drastically low. Now, if I use last year's figures for Harefield, that's for 2015-16, and add those to the 2016-17 figures, the picture looks slightly better, not too good. Also, I would like to you need to take into account that prior to the 1st of April 2016, there was a charge for parking after 6 p.m. Now that no longer applies from the 1st of April 2016. So taking that into account, I've got an estimate for 2016-17. The figure in reality should be more near 1,078,622. That's a drop of 12% on the same period last year. So, having said that, I haven't included the after 6 p.m. tickets. If we were to introduce that as well, we're looking at about on average about 10% drop on the same period last year. 10%. Now that's in line with the national trend in the actual drop in the footfall in town centres. And as Jonathan mentioned earlier, shopping habits have changed. People are buying online more. You can purchase something at 11:59 p.m. and have it delivered to your door the next morning. We've also seen in the same period the co-op closed, BHS closed as well. So that's also had a significant impact on footfall and ticket sales. And you're quite right to say it shouldn't really be a smiley face, but within context, we're not doing too bad in my view.
I'm glad to hear that the smiley face should be the other way around, and I am still concerned even with the extrapolation, because we have seen a decrease in the footfall and in the ticket sales, and that is income to us at the end of the day.
It is, but I would say it is a national trend. The British Parking Association are doing some research at the moment into town centres, small town centres. As soon as I have the data, I'm happy to forward that. But speaking to other parking managers, they have experienced the same that we have as well.
Councillor Brindley.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to discuss the sickness absence an employee, if I may. My first question really is for those employees that are perhaps the worst in terms of their attendance, taking the most amount of sick days. What, if anything, is being done with them? Are we putting them on support plans, like attendance targets, that kind of thing? And then in sort of the other end of the spectrum, what incentives do we have, if any, for employees that are consistently showing really good attendance? Attendance is something that I'm battling with on a day-to-day basis in my job, trying to get students to attend college. A lot of them are quite happy to take a day or two off, or even a week, for the smallest sign of a ruddy nose. And something that we've found has actually had a huge impact in increasing attendance is by offering incentives. So, for example, at the end of the year, we might put on a trip to Alton Towers for all those students that have 100% attendance. Now, I'm not saying that you have to take all of your employees out on a jolly to Alton Towers, but thinking about something to just encourage people to maybe think twice about phoning in sick if they could get to work. I know that we're not going to want people dragging themselves in when they've got tummy bugs and when they are generally really quite poorly. But those people that maybe could perhaps come in and are maybe just choosing not to because they know there's perhaps no further repercussions, if that makes sense.
I understand the figures is the majority of the sickness is long term rather than short term. That's the biggest percentage. And I think with agile working, that's helped, because sometimes people don't want to share germs, or they just don't feel well enough to come into work, make the journey into work, but they can work from home because they've now got the equipment to do that. So I think that's why there is a shift between the short and long term.
If they're working from home, does that still count on the attendance figures or not? So if someone phoned in and said, I'm really unwell, I'm not going to come into work, but I'm going to be working at home, would that then count as an absence day or not?
No.
Well, no, if they're working,
because
they're
they're
As
working.
long as they're working from home.
Just to be clear, Chair, we 75% of our sickness is long term, and is either in all cases it was through a GP and a fit note process, etc. We have a sickness absence management policy. We are reviewing it, as I said earlier, but it does have attendance targets, it has triggers. We do dismiss on the grounds of ill health if somebody hits a level 3, unless there are good reasons not to dismiss. And we go through that process. And I think it's fair to say that we have something in the order, I think it's 60% of our employees have 100% attendance records. So it's actually...
Is that recognised in any way?
We acknowledge it each year. We don't offer an incentive or a reward, but we do write letters to people thanking them for their 100% attendance record. In terms of the what we are doing, obviously we offer support. We do in some cases where, for example, an employee is capable of working but not capable of doing their job. So, for example, if I give you an example, say a refuse loader damages their foot so they can't walk but they can sit at a desk, then we will redeploy and offer them work, and we do actively do that. We look for ways of getting people back into work. But the underlying issue for us is the long-term absence, which I have to say, in I think every case, as far as I'm aware, is legitimate. It's backed by a medical assessment, and it is your classic people with cancer, people with long-term medical conditions, underlying medical conditions, which are things that it's very difficult to manage unless you take a much harder line. And as a responsible employer, what we try and do is we try and get people fit before we decide what to do.
And I'll just add the extra bit with people coming to work with sniffles and colds, etc. I once spent an hour and a half, which I'll never get back again, on the sick building syndrome. It's like an aeroplane. Somebody sneezes in the aeroplane and the germs go everywhere. So if people are sick, they shouldn't be here and contaminate other people, in my opinion. But we've got the processes in place in order to try and deal, not particularly with the sick building syndrome, but I can never forget that. But at least put something in place. Councillor Condacor.
Yeah, I just want to come back a few things on the risk register, if I may. Firstly, on the good side, risk 7, about emergencies and significant incidents. It's really good to hear positive feedback from the crash in Bedworth this week as to how well the council dealt with that. So it is good that the council does actually do some things well. But the real worrying risks are the borough plan and the economic one, R4, economic viability of the borough. Because the borough plan is being objected to by all the other councils around us. Yeah, the Rugbys, the Warwicks, they're all actually putting in an objection to our plan because we haven't taken on 15,500. In terms of the economics, we're not getting a good deal from the LEP and the Midlands Connect, and all these organisations that are actually working for growth across Coventry and Warwickshire really aren't doing a good job from the Nuneaton Borough. They seem to be putting tarmac down, they have plans of road schemes, but we haven't got the economic development in our town of actually like refurbishing the co-op. In Hinckley, the council has taken over the old co-op building and is then breaking it up and doing things with it. We've got no proactive help from any of the agencies, the LEPs, or whatever, actually really generating employment at the moment. And we talked about this £44 million that could potentially come sliced up into Coventry and Warwickshire. We really don't know what that's going to do. The theory, from my point of view, is it's going to be the demolish the Dunelm and the gym and build a big roundabout to ease the traffic problems. But that doesn't actually solve the lack of jobs in town. That just brings more traffic through town and actually destroys jobs, just like we had with the Moody Bridge project. So we've got no visibility. All this economic help we're supposed to be getting, all this stuff from the LEPs and that, because as elected members of the borough or the county, we haven't the foggiest what the LEP's doing. We haven't the foggiest what the combined authority's doing in terms of actually creating work. The growth hub has failed us, And looking at today I saw the Midlands Connect report for the very first time, and they're talking about speeding up trains from Birmingham to Leicester, from Coventry to Leicester. And one big fear, I mean, it's not even on the maps of the Midlands Connect project, is actually they'll mean the trains will run through Nuneaton from Coventry to Leicester without stopping. They'll have less stops at Nuneaton. Yeah. And it's actually connecting the cities and ignoring Nuneaton and Bedworth.
Anybody like to?
Thank you, Chair. Page 31, risk 4, failure to maintain the economic vibrancy of the borough / town centres. And you put a mitigation in there as being a member of the West Midlands Combined Authority. And then in the sources of assurance, you've put minutes of the Combined Authority meetings. How can members be assured when there is no formal mechanism within the council's procedures at the moment to report back or even question the leader on specific or other portfolio holders on specific meetings which have taken place at the West Midlands Combined Authority where they are acting on our behalf? For example, I was reading some minutes and our very own chair went to a scrutiny meeting of the West Midlands Combined Authority. From what I read, there wasn't an awful lot to actually assist in the meeting. In the minutes, I don't know whether there was anything more formal in there because it wasn't very useful from my perspective. But I think, and this is where one of my major concerns comes about the West Midlands Combined Authority and its membership, is how we actually make sure that Nuneaton is getting the best deal out of it. So what mechanisms are officers suggesting that we put in place, either and with your specialty of constitutional reform, Phil, for example, is this something that the Constitutional Review Working Party should look at, for example? Because if it's a source of assurance and we're not doing anything about scrutinising it here, I know it's on the agenda to look at the West Midlands Combined Authority as a whole, but if they are having scrutiny meetings and we are having representatives go, should they not be reporting back to scrutiny panels here what's happening? If the leader is going to meetings, should there be, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, a report from the leader at full council about the activities that he's been undertaking as part of the West Midlands Combined Authority in a similar way that we have the Cabinet report? Because how can you put it down as a source of assurance if we're not doing anything about it?
Well, to answer the easy question first, Jack, I mean, obviously we're simply saying that there are accessible to all members are the minutes of the West Midlands Combined Authority. The wider question is more interesting, and it is something that we will have to pick up at some stage in terms of our relationship with West Midlands Combined Authority. Now, I don't have an answer to that at the moment because it is, to a certain extent, it is still evolving. Our relationship with the Combined Authority as a non-constituent member is still evolving, and therefore it's difficult to see at this stage how all of those non-constituent members will need to engage in terms of its constitutional arrangements with the Combined Authority. I would expect there's something to develop, and I'm to an extent I'm looking at the chair here because I think that the chair might have a better idea of the direction that the Combined Authority is going and what its relationship will be with the non-constituent members, and it may well be that it is something that the scrutiny process will highlight in terms of we need to have more visibility internally of what's going on externally. But at this stage, it's certainly not something that, I don't think we've got to that point where there are things that are directly impacting upon NBBC to the extent that we would say, right, we now need to have something specific in our constitutional arrangements, council procedurals, whatever it is, to deal with that. Just as we don't have anything for any of the other external bodies, like the LEP, for example. We have nothing that captures the LEP or the what would have been the shadow EPB, which is currently the what we call the joint committee. So all of those are things that are happening outside, which I think will probably get to a point where they will need to then be engaged with the constitution. I'm not saying we're not there yet, because to an extent we are, but I would expect it to be done in a way where all of the non-constituents did it as an operational exercise together, because it would be something that would be signalling we're now moving to that next phase where we're not just participants. It now means much more than it does at the moment.
If I can try and answer some of the questions, yes, myself, I'm on one particular panel. Councillor Haynes is on the audit panel, etc. And there's no formal way as yet in order to get reports back to the authority. And Shirley and I are actually going to go to a meeting in a couple of weeks' time where we're going to be sitting down with the rest of the CA to turn around and say how we actually do this in principle. Because I've got to admit, like Philip has said, there's the meetings that have been at the current moment, like the first meeting was, you could just say it was a meet and greet, you know, say this is who we are and this is etc. etc. Then we've had some training at Birmingham University, which I attended, and then we had another meeting about 4 weeks ago. So as I've been the non-constituent members, we're still arguing what role that we play within the overall situation, because the mayor will be elected this year, whether we like it or not. It's this government's policy that this should happen, and that mayor will have a great deal more power than currently. And as we know, some authorities like Warwickshire and others refused to engage with the process until they were dragged screaming and shouting into the actual process. But yes, we're going to have to look to see if there's some formal way that we can get the minutes back to turn around and say this is what's happening within the region, if I can use that word, as a whole, and where we actually fit within the scheme of things. And yes, the question about the LEPs, etc., still are hanging there, and we still don't know how to. I'm not saying it's just a matter of process. Perhaps that's what it is, in order to go from A to B to C to D, and there's still a misconnect somewhere along the line, and we've got to try and deal with that to make sure that whatever has been agreed, like I get papers through as a committee member, and basically I go along and say my piece, but the six big Coventry, Birmingham, etc., etc., they're the ones that could make the ultimate decisions, and we are there as we're trying to all bit in about Nuneaton, Bedworth, or whatever. So they're still tinkering with the system, and we'll have to see what comes out at the other end. And Shirley and I are going to go and we've got a couple of 3 points over hopefully of which way we can get back to what's happening here, because it's going to be important. This government has decided that this is the way we're going to go along. This mayor, when he gets elected, is going to have a great deal of power, and how we hold that power to account is something that we've yet to sort out, particularly with us being non-constituent members, rather than part of the big six. So I'm looking forward to the challenge, but whenever that challenge comes, but we've got to get something practically up, policies up and running, so we can report back. Councillor Haynes.
Yeah. First of all, we can do some good. I managed to get an assurance that we would partake in the transport of the West Midlands and the benefits that the constituents of the West Midlands get now would be extended to us. I also raised the question about members who did not want to join in the first place, but are now on the same basis as Nuneaton and Bedworth as a constituent member, but they've put their leader on the cabinet in charge of finance, and I thought that was deplorable. But at least we can make ourselves heard.
Councillor Thundercott.
Yeah, I've tried to go to all these meetings. I've been to 8 or so meetings of the Joint Committee and videoed them. I've been to 2 meetings of the Combined Authority, one that was held here and one that was held at the University of Warwick. I've been to 1 meeting of the LEP, but obviously I wasn't allowed in. The fundamental thing is, we talk about having our voice heard. We have our council leader or his substitute going to these meetings and supposedly speaking on our behalf. We don't know what he says most of the time. When I have been, our council says absolutely nothing at these meetings. They're like rabbits in the headlights. And when I look at people who are politically very different to me, like Chris Saint in Stratford-upon-Avon, he's not even a constituency as much as us. He goes to these meetings and actively fights for Stratford-upon-Avon. These LEPs, combined authorities, joint committees are really important. All of the development money, all the government money, all the transport schemes is now going through all these important bodies. And if our leaders go into these things and not actually asking for stuff, not seeing what's going on, it's Chris's point. We haven't got a scrutiny way of then actually saying, well, council leader or just substitute, what did you ask for at the last meeting? We are actually getting nothing apart from tarmac. And this is why we need to be really involved with the combined authority, the LEP and all these things, and actually getting the jobs that we need. And actually, yeah, some council leaders just, they're like me, they always talk, but they don't just sit there. They're actually being great ambassadors for their council. And yeah, Chris Saint, Stratford-upon-Avon, they aren't even yet a non-constituent member, but they go as a potential non-constituent member. And they're fighting their corner. And we're failing to do anything useful at the LEP. And as an Economic Prosperity Board, Economics Committee, and looking at these risks, we are just getting left behind. They're virtually going to demolish Nuneaton, put roads through, and it'd be a desert other than housing. We are totally failing.
I would turn around and disagree with that, Councillor, because I could assure you, when Councillor Haynes has said, and I have as well, I've put point of view across, and people are listening to them or not listening to them. At the end of the day, the system is set up for the big 6 in order to deal with the CA, and they will ultimately, through the mayor, once the mayor's in place, I think we'll have a different animal, and it's we'll have to wait till May. So when the mayor's in, so the accountability. But I can assure you that when we go along to discuss how it should be fed back, we shall be bringing things mentioned up to date and try and get some sort of formal process in order for people to understand what's happening and where it's happening. Currently, you're talking about 5 million people within the region, and that's a hell of a lot of people, and it's a hell of a lot of councils as well. The ones that the big 6 plus the rest. We haven't quite got there yet, but hopefully in a couple of 3 meetings time we'll actually get there. Councillor Haynes, did you indicate them? No? Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. My wider point wasn't about the intricacies of what happens at the combined authority. It's about the principle of how we actually make sure we are meeting the requirements of the risk register. Because you can argue about what's in the minutes, that's a political point, but how do we actually make sure we meet what's in the risk register? Can I move a suggestion that we refer this issue to the Constitutional Review Working Party? It goes onto their agenda so that when, and I know that Councillor Neil Phillips is the chair, that when these things start to come up and they come out, we can then start to be on the ball and look at them, because there may be some issues which come up immediately after the election of the Metro Mayor that we need to look at, but we might have to put some transitional arrangements in place until more formal scrutiny arrangements come down the line from central government or from the combined authority itself. But it's important that we as members develop our own way in the meantime of being able to fulfil our purpose and our role of being scrutineers. So I move that recommendation and hope it gets some support.
If you that as chair.
Okay, so if you wish a second, then I shall second that, because it really is important, because this CA is going to make a massive impact on Nuneaton and Bedworth, not just Nuneaton, and Nuneaton and Bedworth. and of course the whole region, or even the sub-region, Coventry, etc. included. So there's a certain extent it's exciting of what's going to possibly happen, but that possibility has got to be brought back in order for us to scrutinise, or what's the old saying is saying truth to power. So we've got to try and make sure what happens there, we've got some input, and then we can feed it back. Anybody else in this item? So with those recommendations about going to the Constitutional Working Party, etc., everybody in favour of that? Any comments were made there, because at the end of the day, we are responsible for what happens, and there should be some kind of feedback for this authority as well as everybody else. Shirley and I are going to a meeting in a couple of 3 weeks, and we're going to discuss the exact thing. And let's hope we can get a model set up that we can bring back to the committee, and then tell them and say this is what the model is going to be or suggested. Then we can tweak it and then take it back and try and get something sorted, because it is, the CA is something that's going to be very important. Whether we like it or not, this government has decided that's what's going to happen, so that's what's going to happen. Okay? Verbal presentation by Jonathan.
Well, I mean, I think I've got covered quite a bit in sort of the conversations, really. But I mean, there were a couple of bits and pieces. I thought it might be worthwhile, sort of, you know, just like I say, sort of covering some of my first impressions and looking at some of the bits and pieces that we're looking at in terms of the £200,000 capital budgets as well. Despite sort of obviously painting a doomy picture in terms of the national picture, you know, we have got I've spent the last 9 years in Hinckley. We have got a strong national retail offer in Nuneaton. You know, with Hinckley haven't got a big Next, they haven't got a Top Man Top Shop, they haven't got a big Debenhams, they haven't got a Shoe. The actual national retail offer is quite strong. I think it stands at about 23% of our total ground floor commercial offer within the town centre, and in Bedworth it's 17%. If you look at our independent offer, we are at a lower percentage there, and possibly where we do get vacant units, they are some of the larger units, and how we can sort of provide opportunities for people looking at coming to do business in the town centre to create the kind of environment that they want and the size of the units at an affordable price. So that means obviously conversation with the landlords and developers in relation to that. And again, maybe that's an area that we can look at, is how we encourage those small independent businesses to come into the town centres and support the national retail offer. I mean, just sort of when we were talking about markets, it was interesting. I came across a clipping the other day in a newspaper for coach trips to Nuneaton Market and Dobbies, which I thought was very good. So obviously somebody sees something in our markets, and maybe that's again an area that we can try and exploit and encourage people to come to our town centres. I think in terms of our other strengths, our heritage, are we making the most of our heritage, and can we actually use that as an attraction to our town centres and drive that? I always go into a town centre and look up rather than down and see the type of buildings that we've got about, and there's some great buildings in our town centre and some great heritage. I've met with the George Eliot Fellowship representatives there, obviously with the centenary event coming up as well, to see how we can sort of tie in with their plans for the centenary. I think in terms of obviously with the new developments and the new homes being built in the areas, all of our opportunities there for us to attract those people and communicate straight away with them by looking at providing things like welcome packs, maybe with some vouchers in from some of the stores and what have you, and a bit of information about the local services in the town centres and the markets and all of these bits and pieces. So there's really sort of a combination of making the most of what we've got here and the assets that we have actually got in the town centre, which, like I say, certainly compared to my experiences in Hinckley, are, you know, quite sort of positive in terms of that national retail core key attractors, if you like, and the size of the market. There's clearly some work to be done there, but I think we can build on those really how we go out and communicate with our community to draw them in and get them engaged and involved in what we do in the town centres as a whole. I'm lucky that as part of my remit I also cover comms and marketing, so that fits very nicely in with obviously the plans in terms of looking at how we do that communication and get these people involved in what we're trying to achieve in terms of the town centre environment.
Any questions? Councillor Condico?
Absolutely loved your idea of spring clean. Please get councillors involved. We'll actually make it a bit of a fun day maybe, obviously outside the perimeter. But no, it really does look tired, our town centre, and the more we can do to give it a clean, maybe put some stickies on some of the old signs and just get some signage. I mean, going around the ring road, we need signs around the ring road, say market parking, and really try and...
Certainly signage needs to be reviewed. I think the connection between the bus station and the town centre and that corner as well with Harefield Road, if we look at our vacant unit rates, 50% of our vacant unit rates or vacant units within the town centre come in 3 streets.
One of the things we had in the past, you talked about vacancy rates.
Yeah.
When we had the Pure Gym people in the other week about their free parking offer, they said the vacancy rate in the Nuneaton and Bedworth was 16%, which sounds plausible. When I've done surveys, it's around then. So it's really good if we get an acknowledgement we've got a problem and actually then try and fill it, because in the past we've had the policy of the Nuneaton's doing really well, we've got below average vacancy rate, which is obviously a total load of... So it's really good, you're looking at shops, and I'm like Chris, I'm actually beginning to look optimistic that we might be able to do something if we actually have the will to do it. One of the other things that keeps going wrong is we don't understand small businesses. At Christmas we have free parking on a Sunday, and we do things when the small businesses are closed, and we do need to look at some of our Christmas promotions and things like that, actually trying to actually put foot forward into the small businesses rather than putting foot forward into the pound shops and things. So I hope you take on board, and your vast experience, I'm sure you know all the tricks to actually make sure that if we're actually effectively spending money on giving a discount, we're actually then getting the footfall back into our small businesses, because we need to keep them alive. We've lost the cycle shop, Battlefield Cycles, I understand. The sushi bar didn't last. There's so many hole in the walls died, which where my brother used got his holy jeans for decades. We've lost a lot of really new and old small businesses, and yet we desperately need some new start. So spring clean, really sort of advertise it as a new start and get some of those people back from Hinckley. And you mentioned, I didn't know when that told me about the pound shop, which one is closing, what's happening about that as well. But we need to keep getting people into the old co-op. If the 1 of the 2 pound shops closes, we need to get someone in there quickly, and we need to get the British Home stores reused.
I had a meeting with the road manager last week. There may be some news imminent in terms of that, and I've got a couple of other brands in his location as well, so he's quite confident that he can have a very high occupancy rate come sort of Christmas time in the road walk, which is encouraging. I think one of the things I'm keen to do as well is establish a number of measures within the town centre as well, so that we can actually gauge how we're performing. We're looking at the investment for the town centre Wi-Fi scheme, which will give us quite a considerable amount of data in return, so we understand our customers more effectively. We can look at length of dwell, we can understand where they're coming from, how often they're coming, and because the system is being rolled out across the county, we can understand their interaction with some of the other settlements around Warwickshire as well. We'll also have the footfall and movement monitoring element as that, so we can actually, for the first time, really understand not only the patterns of when people are coming in and what numbers, but how they're actually using and moving around our town centre, which I think is crucial to ultimately what we're trying to achieve, because it's no longer a finger in the air. I remember when I first was involved with town centres, it was going out in the wet twice a year with the clicker, clicking people for 2 hours. But this is obviously a lot more effective in terms of providing us with that information. Small businesses, they are key to town centres these days in terms of their development. I think as part of that we need to look at the business support element within that small business programme, because my experience is that some of these small businesses come in the last 6 months and they're gone. So it's how we can work with some of our partners as well in terms of providing some of the support to encourage that longevity and sustainability within the town centres of the smaller businesses.
Councillor Brindley?
Thanks, Chair. I think whenever we talk about town centres, a lot of focus is often given to the decline of the markets, the rise that we've seen in the amount of charity shops, the amount of pound shops that we've got in the town. But I think from my point of view, whenever I'm sort of like looking at the town centres and sort of like critiquing them, as it were, what is hugely apparent to me is the lack of sort of like bars and restaurants and things like that we've got. And if we look down the road at Hinckley, like you're absolutely right that they don't have sort of like the huge offer of like national stores that we do. But I think what they've done really well in the last couple of years and why we've seen such a rise in sort of like footfall there is the fact that that's the area that they've invested in. Like the places that they've got are sort of like trendy, up and coming places like the Tarot Lounge, Elbow Room, like the bars and restaurants that they've got, and that's severely lacking in an Eastern town centre. Like if I was wanting to go out with a group of friends for like dinner and drinks, like I'm really limited to sort of places that I could go, and that's why you have to look at going to Hinckley or getting a train to Leicester or Coventry, and it's taking the business out of the town centre. So I think as well as thinking about the daytime economy and the shops and the small businesses, I think I'd quite like to see looking at how we can look at the nighttime economy as well. And a lot of the bars and restaurants, it's not even just the nighttime. Like people could go out for lunch, that would encourage footfall.
Yeah.
In
Well,
the town
it's
centre
that
as well.
early evening economy where the biggest growth opportunities are at the moment. In terms of Hinckley, I was obviously in a position to sort of see what went on there. Their daytime economy is struggling quite badly. In the last sort of 12 months, their downturn on the daytime economy in the core of their town centre has been quite dramatic. But what has shifted is that early evening and nighttime economy provided by the element of leisure in there, and certainly that in terms of our development sites I think is where we need to identify where there are opportunities to try and encourage that in. The cinema, off the back of the cinema, clearly brings in some of those the likes of, it's not Nando's in Hinckley, but some of the other establishments that you sort of mentioned came really as a consequence of the cinema being in the core of the town centre. The nighttime economy again has suffered across the UK. Pubs are closing an increase in number, but we're seeing a shift towards real ale and specialist pubs like this and this kind of stuff. Daytime economy wise, in terms of the food and drink offerings, your cafes, and we've had another one open recently, an independent, which is doing very well and it's very welcome, and has had some dealings with us already in terms of some of the events. So yes, there are opportunities. I think there's, like I say, there's some things that we can do at local level now, but there are other elements that we need to look at in terms of the development plans and the future opportunities in relation to that to drive some of that.
So, I mean, I just think we are up against it a little bit, like in terms of like changes in shopping habits, the fact that people are shopping online or they're not wanting to go into town centres, they're using out of town retail parks where like shops are a lot bigger, they're more spacious, it's free parking. I think rather than sort of like trying to fight those trends and try and like just fighting a losing battle, trying to encourage people to shop in a town centre when that's obviously not what they want to do. It's about sort of like being a little bit more strategic and looking at what else we can offer that would encourage
retail is no longer the key
centres.
attractor for town centres.
Yeah.
It is that leisure element, that community feel, that involvement where it's they come to the weekend and they're saying, what are we going to do? Well, there's something on going on here, or we've got the the right kind of environment for people. It's about the visitor experience. They need to enjoy their experience and get into the habit again of coming into town centres. And I think if we're constantly pushing forward a positive message about our town centres to the community, informing them about what's going on, then that certainly helps in my experience in terms of engaging with them and drawing them in.
Mrs. Palmer?
One thing that did actually work very well in a downtown area of Canada where I used to live, and that was there was a rather large retail store over 3 floors. Obviously we haven't got that here. However, what the local town did, they got together with the local artisan cheesemakers, all the different smaller businesses, and created multiple shops within. So created a mall within a bigger shop. And that was absolutely the place to go. And there was a queue of people waiting, just going, because they were small units. They were affordable and people went there because it was so eclectic.
Yeah, certainly developing, and I sort of mentioned earlier about developing the right environment to attract that kind of businesses. It's not part of the reason that retail has suffered as a consequence of the online shopping is because the effective cost of trading on the high street. And it has to be obviously affordable and appealing and the right kind of environment for those people to come in.
But they were actually making candles in the
Yeah.
shop. They were working whilst they were there, and it just created this
It's
really
that
vibe.
leisure sort of element again
Yeah.
within that in terms of doing that. And then that will complement what we have got in terms of the existing retail offer and the national offer. That we've got there.
Exactly. But it also uses the larger stores that aren't necessarily going to be.
Yeah.
And it actually increased the revenue sort of tenfold because they could command a higher price per.
Yeah, that's where the
somebody in.
engagement with some of the landlords and almost encouraging them and making the planning process accessible as well for them to actually develop and encourage to split units. You know, it has to obviously it's quite a long sort of process in terms of what they have to go through in terms of the re-rating and the issues, and does it devalue their premises, all these considerations that they have to give, and particularly with the larger landlords who, a lot of them are pension scheme providers, and what they're interested in is the book value and the rentable yield of their properties, so they'll always look at protecting that, but it's easier sometimes to work with the local landlords but they don't always have the larger units, so there's a lot of discussions and engagement to be done.
Yeah, it's just sort of different, thinking outside the box and looking at what's successful in other areas and just maybe tweaking it a little from there.
Definitely. Yeah, if you can pull the best practices in from other places.
But the key thing is, I mean, you're obviously encouraged by the whole thing and energised, which is infectious, which hopefully.
I can tell you that I'm enjoying my job, which is
good. Until tonight.
No, including that.
Any other comments from the panel? Councillor Beaumont.
Chairman, I'm just wondering about our new appointment and his connections with Warwickshire.
With Warwickshire County Council?
Yes.
Yes, I've had an induction and several meetings with Warwickshire County Council representatives, and they've actually got their town's conference next week, which I'm attending as well on our behalf. Yeah. So yes, so far very positive.
Yeah.
I think they've identified that we need to look at the town centres and Nuneaton and Bedworth as a priority. So I'll be working very closely with them to see what we can come up with in some terms of partnership working, etc.
Do you see yourself as having any engagement with places like Bulkington?
Yes, certainly do.
Yeah.
Any of the core settlements. I mean, like I say, it's all that community centres, as I see them really, and how we can sort of engage and get those people involved at all of the levels in relation to that.
One of the first responses to the local plan in Bulkington was people wandering around in a bit of a daze saying, we're going to be a town. And while I took very seriously what they said, it's a bit difficult to envisage Bulkington as a town. But someone said the other day, maybe we'll wind up with NBBC as a title. Instead of the two Bs, you'll have a third called Bulkington. And we do get a third mention in a lot of speeches that I hear as an additional place name to identify Nuneaton and Bedworth. So we certainly welcome you coming on and having a look.
Certainly,
because the clean-up you've mentioned for Nuneaton, I think we'd like one of those for Bulkington as well. And I think there are, I have heard in the past about Bulkington, villages of Bulkington size, which is over 6,000 residents, and completely surrounded by green belt before or after the local plan. Having some additional finance via some of these agencies in Warwickshire.
All right, okay.
Because town centre improvement, I think, also applies to larger villages as well.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Condico.
I'm just going to come back on the Mrs Palmer's idea about breaking stuff up into artisan bits, because we've got a place like Fargo Street doing very well allegedly. But there's this co-op building we do need to get a plan for what necessarily we do with the whole of the co-op, but what we can do with, they've got an Abbey Street or a bit,
Well, it would fit in with the old cooperative theme.
So if we can take part of that and actually make 6 million for the whole lot, but if you can take a part of that and actually make something as an attraction in it, that'd be great.
Okay. And, we're in dialogue with them at the moment about doing the shop jackets just to smarten up the the front onto Queen's Road and to Abbey Street.
You don't want smart jackets, you want to open it up and get things in there.
I would prefer real shops.
You don't own it, do you?
No,
Unfortunately
not.
Unless you've got 6 million quid, I don't see how you're going to.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the panel? Well, thanks for coming along, Jonathan.
My pleasure.
You've seen the tactics in front of you, and hopefully you take some of their points of view on board. And I'm sure we'll see you in the not too distant future.
Certainly
And
will.
we have positive outlook for all the town centres.
Yes. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay? Thanks for that then. Right, item number 10, the work programme, Shirley.
Right, thank you, Chair. I've handed out a revised version of the work programme purely because it's been sent out with last month's one, and the 3 at the bottom hadn't been included. So the Gresham Road, the Griff Canal Arm and the Freedom of Information and Complaint Review Report were put on at the last meeting and didn't make their way onto there, so those are on there. I've had a word with the Chair and I'm proposing for the June meeting, and obviously as yet you don't know, some of you, whether you'll be on the panel this time for next year. But if the OSNS review reports go forward as is at the moment, what I'm hoping is that we will have the forward plan on each of the agendas, but starting in June. And it will be the end of year performance report to that meeting. And what I've suggested to the Chair is that, and as that came out in the review, is that we maybe have that meeting just to look at the performance, the forward plan, and invite the portfolio holders relevant to this panel along to that meeting, so that we can maybe have a bit more detailed discussion around what might be better to go forward with the work programme for the coming year, and make it a little bit more sort of focused, if you like, on what are the priority areas. Obviously this work programme will be what goes forward to that, and it will be for the panel at that time to decide what they want to keep or not of that. But that's what I'm proposing for that.
Councillor Condacard.
We've got this review going on about complaints as well, and FO and all this freedom of information and stuff. Is it worth putting that on that first meeting as well, or is that not going to be ready in time?
I don't know is the answer to that. We're having the first meeting of the group on Monday, I think it is it the 20th? I think that's right.
Monday. 20th.
Anyway, we're only just kicking that off. I would hope that it would be finished, or at least...
I've had that and the other one crossed out.
However, but I'll check with
You better check and let me know, yeah.
So
well, I rang up and because I saw
maybe it will be ready for June, maybe not. I can't say at this time.
Okay. Right, that'll be up to the new panel to decide which is with the work programme for the next year. On behalf of myself, I'd like to thank all the committee members, all the panel members for their forbearance, and hopefully we've enjoyed this year, and I think next year with the CA etc. coming up, I think we'll have a more exciting year, and I'd like to thank officers also for the work that they've done on behalf of this panel. So saying that, thanks one and all once again, and safe journey back.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Mind you, it's March.
Turn their recording off, otherwise
Yes.
they'll sneeze on it.
Right.